The air of the field hospital is thick with it. The sweet, cloying stench of men who will live and men who won't, already blending together. Welcome to the world, kid. You weren't born in a house or a village. You were born at the edge of a battlefield, into a family of medics, bone setters, sawbones, butchers who call themselves saints because the alternative is admitting what they are. Your destiny isn't to fight, it's to clean up after the fight, to stitch men back together so they can be torn apart again. Other infants drift asleep on lullabies and whispered prayers. Your cradle rocks to a different rhythm, the low moan of the wounded and the steady, sawing cadence of the bone saw. That sound becomes your heartbeat, your curse, your prayer. Long before you understand words, you understand that sound means survival for someone else. The home is a canvas tent staked in churned mud, straw soaked black with blood, buckets stacked with limbs, no longer attached to anyone who needs them. Soldiers nod to your father with something like reverence, but when they think you can't hear, they call you the ghouls. They need your hands, but they fear them, because your presence means they are close to becoming meat. You are the last stop. After you, there's only the grave, or the firing line again. When you start crawling, you don't head for toys. You crawl toward the discarded bandages, fascinated by the dark rust-brown maps of old blood. Your first word isn't mama, it's tourniquet. The calling is already in your veins. Childhood is a story meant for other people. While 5-year-olds chase hoops and sticks, you're handed rolls of linen and told to tear them into strips. Your playground is a swamp of filth where one wrong step can drop you into waste and disease. You learn to move carefully, not gently, efficiently, because hesitation lets blood run out between your fingers, and your father's slap is as fast and precise as a scalpel. Your daily routine is simple, brutal, unforgiving. Boil bandages until the steam strips tears from your eyes. Haul buckets of foul water until your spine feels like it will snap. Then comes the line of wounded. One glance, one breath, one verdict. This one can wait. This one is already gone. This one might live if you work fast. You learn early that speed feels like mercy, and hesitation feels like murder. Other children learn their letters. You learn the sounds of suffering. A scream means life. A whimper means hope is thinning. Silence means you're too late. The soldiers' children call you leech boy and scatter when you pass. You smell permanently of carbolic acid, stale blood, and decay. Your clothes are ruined beyond saving. Your hands are cracked raw from scrubbing skin that never feels clean. You don't have friends. You have bodies. Your formal training begins with maggots. You learn to place them gently into putrid wounds, watching them do what blades cannot. Eat the rot without killing the man. Your father recites it like scripture. Desperation is the mother of our craft. You learn that battlefield medicine isn't healing. It's salvage. And you are the accountant of human worth. Your first real lessons come holding men down during amputations. The convulsions. The way strong soldiers beg like children when the saw bites bone. The wet thud of a limb hitting the bucket. Don't flinch. If you do, you'll be holding buckets for a week. The days blur into a liturgy of hell. Wake to cannon fire. 18 hours of cutting, sewing, sawing. Collapse onto a blood-stained cot while the ghosts scream behind your eyes. You develop the surgeon's shudder early, a fine tremor from exhaustion and horror. By 10, you can read a man's fate in the colour of his lips. Your first real test comes at 12. A cavalryman is carried in, his gut laid open. Your father is busy. "Pack it," he snaps. "Stop the bleeding or watch him die." Your small hands disappear into the heat and slick chaos of another man's insides. He dies staring at you. You don't cry. You wash your hands. "You'll lose more than you save," your father says. "The trick is not to count." You learn to bury faces deep, never tallying the ledger you carry anyway. At 15, you're deemed ready for your first solo amputation. The patient is a boy your age, his legs shattered beyond hope. Your hands shake as you take the saw. Too slow and you prolong agony. Too fast and you cut life short. You learn the rhythm. Not perfect, survivable. Your father watches every stroke. His cane waits for mistakes. Your blood offering comes during a desperate surgery. A struggling man knocks the blade from your hand and it opens your palm. Your blood joins his on the table. Your father stitches you with the same thread. "Now you belong," he mutters. It sounds like a bond until you realize it's a sentence. Gangrene becomes your greatest terror. Men survive clean shots, walk out of your tent breathing, only to return days later, smelling sweet and wrong. Black spreads where pink once lived. The choice is always the same. Cut deeper or dig a grave. Your first successful resection, carving the rot out before it poisons the blood, feels like stealing a man back from death. Your first failure is worse. You watch a man you thought you saved fade anyway, and you learn that some victories rot quietly after you turn away. That lesson never leaves your skull. You don't start wars. You are what happens after. Every decision, morphine, bandages, time, is a judgment you're unfit to make but forced to deliver. The weight settles behind your eyes, constant and cold. You develop a poultice of honey and mouldy bread that works better than official doctrine. They call it superstition. They keep using it anyway. Your needle flashes in lantern light. 3 sutures before the man can finish screaming. You stop bleeding. You amputate. Then the chaplain or the sergeant decides what comes next. Your first masterwork saves a man shot through the lung. You find the bullet, patch the hole, watch him breathe. For one moment, you feel divine. Then the next wave arrives. At 20, your nerves are frayed, your heart calcified, and you've saved exactly 1 man today. 1,000 more are coming. Your reputation grows. Officers want you. Veterans trust you. Your name steadies men more than rum. 3 days without sleep. A river of bodies. When it ends, a colonel surveys your work and says, "Efficient, already planning the next slaughter." You enable the war. You do not control it. Fever claims men you laboured over for hours. Their friends glare as if your stitches trap death inside. Sleep becomes a negotiation with ghosts. Your hands begin to shake. You delegate delicate work. The whispers start. Then the officer's son arrives, gut wound. Your hands betray you, a dropped clamp. He dies. The officer says nothing. His silence ends your career more completely than rage ever could. You move to teaching, hygiene, supervision. It's dignified. It feels like surrender. At 58, the plague hits. Bloody flux. Men fall faster than artillery can kill them. Against instinct, you enter the tent. No blades, just water, just presence. Your shaking hands are steady lifting heads, offering sips. You speak softly. You do not look away. When it ends, men remember not the saint, but the old medic who knelt in filth beside them. The general assembles the regiment. No praise of skill, only truth. A salute, not a title. Recognition. You die in a clean bed paid for by men you patched together. Your funeral is attended not by generals, but by scarred veterans standing silent. Your stone reads, "He fought the only war that mattered." After a lifetime of stitching men for slaughter, you find a moment of grace.